Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the matrix. So Trump is leading in the polls against Old Joe, and the Secret Service attempted to assassinate him. Old Joe steps down. Harris replaces him as the Democratic nominee. The real polls show that Trump is leading against Harris, and a so-called ex-military guy attempted to assassinate Trump once again. This is becoming a national security threat. And once again, the left-wing media has blamed Trump for this assassination attempt. The more they make those absurd comments, it reveals that clearly the Democratic Party is behind these plots. Celebrities have threatened Trump, politicians have threatened Trump, heck, they've literally threatened to shoot Trump. We said there would be something outrageous happen in this presidential election. For those who may not be aware of this analysis, or those who forgot, let's go over this again. In 2016, Trump was elected president, right? He was deemed racist, yet he gained more black votes than any other Republican president in this modern day. You had non-white citizens publicly showing their support for Trump, of course wearing MAGA hats and such. Okay, follow the plot. Throughout his administration, the left-wing media, progressives, liberals, Hollywood, and the Democratic Party were pushing the narrative Trump was racist. Now, in this insane asylum, the American people were more drawn to Trump despite the narrative. And this is what angered the left. They knew their rhetoric was not working. Then, of course, the 2020 election. Oh yeah, racist narrative wasn't working. So let's conspire with China to, let's bypass that one. I think you know why it happened. Trump had gained more non-white support in that election, contradicting the narrative. Several impeachments, charged with invisible crimes. The Democrats didn't impeach Trump because he was racist, though. Wouldn't that be the main reason for those impeachments? Of course, but they knew there was actually no evidence of it. So if they did attempt to impeach Trump based on being racist, it would be thrown out. And we come back up to speed. Old Joe enters the old folks' home. The Secret Service tries to sneak in an assassination. And Harris is living in some alternate reality, ducking and dodging due to having absolutely no idea of what the hell she's doing. Haitians become the latest source of pushing the same narrative, and instead of a Haitian attempting to assassinate Trump for, quote, insulting the Haitian community, it was a white man. Yeah, the white person comes to the rescue. Hey, seems the Haitian community wasn't offended enough, right? Why wasn't there a Haitian who attempted to assassinate him? A white man decides, I think he deserves to die for being racist against people of color. But the people of color aren't motivated to attempt this? Yeah, even if the culprit is ex-military, he was the same pawn used by the federal government to carry out the assassination. The incident regarding Haitian migrants eating pets has been proven to be true. The American people have witnessed the evidence, and it vindicates Trump, which the left can't stomach the reality of it. Harris isn't getting the expected support from the black community, so all hell is broken loose. In other words, Trump exposes the truth about racism. Indirectly, though, and that's why we want him to be elected, to prove racism is an illusion. A significant percentage of the African American community is voting for Trump. A significant percentage of the non-African American black community is voting for Trump. A significant percentage of the Hispanic community is voting for Trump. A significant percentage of the Mexican American community is voting for Trump. A significant percentage of the Asian community is voting for Trump. A significant percentage of the white community is voting for Trump. And let's be honest, communities that are driven to accomplish the American dream, such as becoming business owners, are voting for Trump. If you follow here, there's no racism because voters are supporting Trump. But the left, who relies on race and racism the most, will literally try to murder a man that would indirectly expose the truth about racism. And one of the conspirators of pushing the racism illusion is, in fact, guess who? The white man. So it's fitting that a white man has been the race that has attempted to assassinate Trump twice. Now, I want to also switch gears a bit in mentioning the Idaho 4 case. Again, someone has suggested that we go back to that investigation. We've kept an eye on it. Apparently, there has been a change of venue for the trial. Listen, the reason we're not focusing on any of this is because there's not much to focus on, honestly. A change of venue could be a difference, but it will come down to the evidence against Kohberger. The prosecution doesn't have any evidence. They manufactured evidence, and it will be exposed in trial. Simple as that. Now, what many should be pondering is, will Dylan and Bethany be testifying? Now, that is our focus in that trial, because there will obviously be conflicting testimonies from both survivors. Now, let's go back over this for those who are interested. Again, though, we're not investigating the case anymore, nor are we dealing with the trial's fuckery.
As we all know, Dylan's accounts are not credible if she testifies. Her accounts, based on her affidavit, conflict with other reports of the exact time frame that night. In her affidavit, there was no mention of screaming, no mention of any interaction with her housemates, and no mention of a party or party-goers. But in other reports, including what the mainstream media had reported later on, Dylan apparently heard noise, interacted with her housemates, and assumed the alleged Koberger was a partygoer. Now, if there are conflicting accounts from the alleged star witness, then, well, she's not a star witness, to be honest. Her accounts are in question due to different scenarios unfolding the night of the murders. So if Ann Taylor is on her game, she will poke holes in Dylan's testimony, which obviously changes the scenario that night. In the scenario where Dylan interacted with her housemates, this spells trouble for the prosecution. We went over all of this, but again, for those who may have not viewed that investigation, if Dylan was not only awake but also interacted with her housemates, then this means that interaction is coming during the time frame her housemates are being attacked, right? Despite the reports claiming she, quote, assumed there was a party, this is when the attacks and murders had taken place. Now, once you start to dissect this scenario based on common sense, the defense can prove that Dylan was awake and interacting with her housemates. Once this is established, then there is a possibility that her phone records are submitted as evidence. In the report, it states that Dylan told her housemates to quiet down as she was trying to sleep, right? Again, this is during the attacks and murders. Based on Ethan's sister-in-law, Dylan also heard screaming. So you have screaming, a dog barking, and Dylan interacting with her housemates about the noise. Now, it doesn't prove that Dylan knew her housemates were being murdered based on this alone, but what it does do is contradict the setting in the home based on her affidavit, and that's the key. But then again, if Ann Taylor points out that the mainstream media claimed Dylan and Bethany were texting each other during the attacks and murders, then it changes the setting at the home. Here's a sample size of how Dylan will be questioned on the stand.
Miss Mortensen, I want to ask you a few questions regarding your affidavit. In your affidavit, which you provided your accounts of what happened that night, you stated that you heard what you assumed was Kaylee upstairs playing with her dog. Is this correct?
Yes, sir. That's what I thought I heard.
So, you weren't sure that it was Kaylee upstairs playing with the dog, but you assumed that was the case. Is this correct?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. But I heard the dog barking, so I assumed Kaylee was playing with Murphy upstairs.
Okay, I understand. In the affidavit, you claim that you heard someone state, quote, "There's someone here," unquote. Based on the affidavit, this was a female voice. Do you know exactly which female in the home made that statement?
I wasn't sure. I think it was from upstairs, but I wasn't sure. I think it was Kaylee, but the voice was like fading. I couldn't tell really.
Understood. Is it possible that the female voice could have come from the second floor, where you were? Since you weren't sure, then it's possible it could have been Zana who made that statement. You stated you weren't sure where the female's voice came from, but you assumed it was Kaylee, correct?
I mean, it could have been Xana. I don't know. It was late and I was a bit sleepy. But yeah, I'm not sure who it was.
Okay, I understand. Based on the tone, we assume it was a low tone of voice, almost like someone was concerned. Now I know you stated you didn't know for sure who the female was, but you did state that you thought it may have been Kaylee. Can you tell the difference between Kaylee's voice and Xana's voice? Even in a low tone of voice?
The voice was fading away, like they were whispering. I couldn't really tell the difference between the two, but I know how they both sound. It's just like, it wasn't easy to tell at that time, so, you know.
In the affidavit, it states that you heard crying from Xana's bedroom, and then you heard a male voice state, quote, "I'm here to help you," unquote. Could you recognize the male's voice? Did they sound familiar to you?
No, I didn't recognize who that was. It sounded like a stranger. I didn't know what was going on. It just seemed like weird to me. I wasn't sure what was going on or who that was talking. But I did hear Zana crying, so I was kind of concerned at that point.
You stated that you were concerned after hearing Xana crying. Did you interact with her at any point that night to see if everything was okay?
Well, I was like a bit confused, so I just kind of stayed to myself, you know? I didn't think anything was going on. It's just like it was a weird night. I just kind of didn't think anything of it, really.
Interesting, the male you saw, you described him as a white male, dressed in all black, with a mask covering the lower half of his face, standing about 5'10", with bushy eyebrows, walking past you leaving the home. Could you recognize him? And did he say anything to you, such as a threat, as he left the home?
No, he just walked past me. He didn't say anything, he didn't threaten me or anything like that. He just walked past me, and I closed my door after I saw him.
Okay, now I want to address reports regarding your accounts that weren't included in the affidavit. I find these accounts to be a bit different than those in the affidavit. So bear with me here. I only want to verify these claims about that night. First, I want to address a report that claims you were actually interacting with your housemates that night, during the time frame the attacks had taken place. A report claims that you had heard noise and told your housemates, quote, "Quiet down. I'm trying to sleep," unquote. Miss Mortensen, did you at any point interact with your housemates during this time frame? Miss Mortensen, this is a question. Did you interact with your housemates at any point during the time frame the attacks and murders had taken place?
I don't recall any of this. Maybe I did. I'm not sure, though. I can't remember if that happened. It's kind of fuzzy.
The report goes on to state that you thought there was a party, and the suspect, being the defendant, was actually a partygoer who you didn't think much of as he walked past you. Meaning, he didn't appear creepy or suspicious. He was just someone who came to the party. Do you remember any of this taking place that night? During that time frame? Mind you, this is what was reported, based on accounts you apparently provided to a private investigator. Miss Mortensen, you are required to answer questions here. I understand you're under a lot of pressure, but I need you to answer questions. Do you recall providing these accounts to a private investigator about that night?
I didn't, I can't recall any of that. I don't know where that report is coming from. I can't recall if that happened.
Miss Mortensen, must I remind you that you are under oath to tell the truth in this courtroom? You seem to be a bit unsure of what information you provided, and I must come to the conclusion that your affidavit is also in question. But there is more that I want to ask you about regarding that night. The mainstream media reported that you and the other survivor, Bethany Funk, had texted each other during the attacks and murders. Is this correct? And if it isn't correct, where did the mainstream media get this information? If not from Moscow PD again, Miss Mortensen, you are under oath to tell the truth.
I just want to be left alone. I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I being harassed? My life is in danger. People are threatening me. I can't even live my fucking life, you know. This shit is a nightmare. I lost my friends. People are treating me like I killed them. It wasn't supposed to be this way. I tried to help. I can only do so much. I tried to help. It's not my fault. Fuck you. Fuck everyone. Fuck all of this.
No further questions, Your Honor. I think we have our answers.
Yep, that's how it will play out if Dylan testifies, if Ann Taylor is on top of her game. See, the way to expose the frame is to attack Dylan's affidavit and the conflicting accounts that were reported. Also, pointing out that both Dylan and Bethany were texting each other during the attacks and murders changes the setting in the home, which of course contradicts Dylan's accounts in her affidavit. We went over all of this, and we're simply done going over the same thing, like a broken record. We did that in the investigation enough, not doing it again. But here's another sample size, but this time with Moscow PD being brought in to testify, and the defense will ask them about Dylan's whereabouts not being provided. Get a load of this one.
Chief Fry, I want to ask you about Dylan Mortensen and her whereabouts. In your police report, it doesn't provide the whereabouts of Miss Mortensen prior to the murders. But every other housemate, including one of the survivors in Miss Bethany Funk, was provided. Can you explain why Miss Mortensen's whereabouts weren't provided in the police report?
Well, her whereabouts were provided. Miss Mortensen was out on the town prior to the murders. She arrived back at home approximately around 1 a.m.
Wait, I'm sorry, but you didn't provide specifically where Miss Mortensen was prior to the murders. Out on the town does not provide details about where Miss Mortensen specifically was located prior to the murders. Yet every other housemate has a specific location prior to arriving back home. In addition, There are conflicting reports you have provided to the public. In one report, you claim that Miss Mortensen and Miss Funk were out on the town together and had arrived back home together approximately around 1 a.m. In another report, Miss Funk had actually attended the Sigma Chi party with Ethan and Xana. Can you explain why there are conflicting reports? Can you provide a specific location Miss Mortensen was located prior to arriving back home?
Listen, we did a thorough investigation into this case, and all of the information we collected has been released to media outlets. And we have worked diligently to inform the public. We were informed by Miss Mortensen that she was out partying, and that's all we knew. We did a thorough investigation, and her alibi checked out. So, there's nothing inconsistent with our investigation.
With all due respect, Chief Fry, that is unacceptable. You did not do a thorough investigation because Miss Mortensen's whereabouts were not provided. Therefore, she doesn't have an alibi. The public does not know where she was prior to the murders, and based on what you have stated here, Moscow PD also didn't know where she was. But how is this possible when you knew where everyone else was, including the time they were at the specific location? And when they arrived back home, I can't help but think, based on your lack of transparency, that Miss Mortensen's whereabouts were not specified in your police report because it is linked to the murders. If someone's whereabouts were not specified in a police report involving a crime, then anyone with common sense would conclude that that person is a potential suspect, even a primary suspect. Yet, you have not provided this person's whereabouts, yet have cleared them from potentially being involved in the murders? This is not how you carry out a murder investigation, but that's what you did. So it appears to me that you have protected Miss Mortensen and Chief Fry. You might want to think about the decision you've made. Because if you are protecting Miss Mortensen and her whereabouts prior to the murders, then we also have to assume that her affidavit is a form of protection. Protection from the truth being revealed. No further questions, Your Honor.
There's no way around it. See, everyone is focused on what the prosecution has at their disposal, but don't forget, the defense has some very strategic attacks against the prosecution. We just broke them down. Or what about this one? 3 DNA male samples were found at the crime scene, yet none of them have been identified. What is this? Seems someone needs to take notes from fucking CSI. Maybe they can teach them how to actually investigate a murder case.
I have a few questions for you. As you're the lead FBI investigator who submitted the DNA profile to public genealogy sites for a match, so you found a single source of Koberger's DNA on the button of the knife sheath, correct?
Yes, that's correct. The results from that button snap matched the defendant's DNA.
I want to inquire about additional DNA that was discovered by detectives at the crime scene. There were 3 additional DNA samples, those of males, correct?
Well, yeah, that's correct.
The question I have for you, being the lead FBI investigator, who submitted the defendant's single source DNA to the facility, is why haven't the additional 3 DNA samples of those males been identified? I mean, doesn't your agency think it's important to identify those males? I find this difficult to understand. Isn't it protocol? Was there a reason those males weren't identified in any police report?
Well, it's a bit of an ongoing investigation. We haven't pinpointed the profiles of those individuals at this point, but we are currently processing their profiles.
Wait, didn't you collect those DNA samples during the same time frame of the defendants? Within that time frame, you're telling me, and the judge and jury, that you haven't identified those 3 males who could possibly be linked to the murders. Are you honestly providing this explanation to the court? To the jury, either this is incompetence by the lead investigator and the agency, or those 3 DNA samples have been intentionally kept concealed due to being suspects. I won't suggest that they are the killers, but it certainly brings about extreme suspicion about why those males have not been publicly identified, the same as the defendant. At the very least, they have to be considered persons of interest, which the authorities apparently never categorized them as such. But in my 15 years as a criminal defense attorney, I have never come across a case where DNA samples in a murder case have been omitted from the collection of evidence. I have to come to the conclusion that those 3 males are being protected, and that's a major concern. Why protect these 3 males if the defendant is the murderer? No further questions, Your Honor.
Just imagine if Chief Fry is called to testify and is asked about Dylan's whereabouts not being provided in the police report, how could he explain that? He couldn't, and it would lead to a trail back to the scene of the crime. Her whereabouts prior to the murders are linked to the murders, which makes her a suspect. It's that simple, cut and dry. And we suggested in our investigation that the reason her whereabouts were not provided is because Dylan was still at home while everyone else was out partying. She had to be at home because she was the key culprit from inside the home, communicating with the killers simultaneously while the housemates were out partying. There were eyes, quote, out on the town, keeping an eye on the targets, communicating with Dylan, who was still at home. See, we don't know what Bethany knows, but I would suggest that Bethany knows Dylan was involved. The defense would not claim she has exculpatory evidence if she didn't. So, again, as we pointed out in our investigation, Dylan was the inside culprit. With Bonnie and Clyde, Bethany has exculpatory evidence and will snitch on Dylan if she testifies, and everything will come crashing down on the prosecution. This is why they didn't want Bethany to testify. It exposes Dylan, and the frame will be revealed on a national scale. Well, time to start rounding up all the conspirators, right? Kohberger will walk, his life will be ruined. But if the truth is revealed like we've summarized, Kohberger will be vindicated. I would even suggest the whole incel theory, well, might turn out to be quite the ladies' man when it's all said and done. But be careful, because there are those who would still want him to pay for the crimes he never committed. There you go. That's our take on the case. Until there is evidence presented on either side in that trial, we have no interest in going in circles anymore. We wait till the trial gets the engine going, and then we will return. Until then, that's all, folks. This is the Chaos Sector.